Okay. Welcome to another episode of the Carlos Speaks podcast. I'm your host, Carlos, and I'd like to welcome you to episode 4. Um, and like I said last time, I think it's going to be legitimately one of those ones. And you all by now, you know how I like to start the show. Number one, I hope you're well. I hope you're in a good headspace. I hope that you're in a place of peace. It's almost 8:30 p.m. where I am. I hope that you're winding down for the day. And I hope that you're just kind of balancing yourself right now as we begin this episode. So, um, and if you're not well, I pray that you become well sooner than later. And I hope that some part of this conversation helps you find something that kind of guides you and pushes you towards being well. Going right into the show tonight, we're going to delve into what I consider to be sometimes a provocative space, right? But before we get into that, I want to address the comments and questions from the previous episode. I got a lot of questions that I think deserve their own episode, deserve their own space, right? So if you submitted a question and I told you I'm going to get to that, then rest assured that we're going to have an episode that surrounds that particular topic. Other than that, I got like 3 of those. So other than that, it's just been a whole lot of continued support. The subscribers is going up on the YouTube channel. The downloads are going up on Apple Podcasts, and I am grateful for the support. Thank you so much to everybody who like, comment, listen, whatever you do in support of the Carlos Speaks podcast. Thank you. I appreciate all of you. Okay, so tonight's episode, as you probably read from the title, focuses on learning to communicate from a masculine perspective, right? And a few disclaimers. I personally don't care for some of the conversations that surround labels like masculinity, femininity, and things of that nature, right? So I'm not going to delve into those weeds, right? By masculine in tonight's episode, I very specifically mean learning to communicate as a man. That's the only way that I can identify with this particular concept in this particular space from my own personal experiences with learning to communicate. So hopping right into it, I think for me, some of the biggest hindrances that I faced with communicating started when I was a child, right? I was a kid. So if you don't know, I am Southern born, bred, and raised. I am from South Carolina, baby. 843 on the map. Um, and in hindsight, but again, I'm speaking for me because there are a lot of people that can identify with where I'm from and how I grew up. So in hindsight, there were a lot of things in my childhood that conditioned me to be a man that did not communicate well. Period. Right? So the kind of South that I'm from, very strict household. I'm a PK, right? For those of you that don't know, a PK is a pastor's kid, a preacher's kid. which means, baby, I was raised in the church. I'm talking about Sunday was church. Monday was the usher board meeting. Wednesday was Bible study. Thursday was choir practice. Saturday was praise dance team practice. Baby, we was in the church. You hear me? There was maybe 1 or 2 days a week that we didn't go to church. I'm talking about I'm so church that when I was sick, we still went to church because, baby, there is healing in the room. Come on in the room. If you don't feel good, baby, we're going to lay it at the altar kind of church, right? And I set that foundation to kind of lay the pathway that segues into taking the Bible and justifying misogynistic behavior. And this traversed a significant portion of my life. I'm talking about for a child through my teenage years, through my college experiences, through my experiences with marriage, divorce, as a dad. I'm talking about, baby, the Bible tells me that the man is the head of the household. I don't hear nothing else about it. Right? And I thought that was right because of how I was raised in the church. And then the other side of that is that coming from a strict household, conversations were very one way throughout the entirety of my childhood. You're going to do this because I told you to do it. How you feel about what I told you to do ain't none of my business, and I bet not hear your opinion because ain't no room for it, right? Now, was that said in that particular way? Absolutely not. However, you knew when your mama said, so I was raised by my grandparents primarily, right? So my mom was my grandma. My dad was my granddad. So growing up, I wish you would. What you was about to say? You got something on your heart? No, ma'am. Right. Yeah. And you bet not say nothing under your breath because I'm going to knock it back in your mouth. Right? Hey, bro, it is what it is. If you're from the South, if you grew up in a church, if you're from a strict household, you might be able to identify with what I'm saying. Now, I've struggled with that because if I'm going to be honest, having that type of upbringing has supported success in my life. The trauma has contributed to the treasure. Now, that does not mean that it's right at all. Please hear me when I say, just because the trauma contributes to the value of the treasure does not mean that the trauma was right. Right? And how did you benefit, Carlos? I'm glad you asked. So coming up in that type of environment, you have to be put together a certain way, right? If I was to use, phrases that I would associate with it, it would be, baby, we raise dogs where I'm from. You know what I mean? And when I say that, I mean there wasn't a lot of room for emotion. There wasn't room for opinion. You were given an order and you acted it out, period. You go to school and you carry yourself in a particular way or else. I grew up in the age of or else, not in the age of communication, right? So, to circle that back round to my personal experience, I grew up muzzled. I grew up in a household where we had very traditional roles. We have very traditional discipline. Baby, it is what it is. It's how we get down over here. So I spent the majority of my life, right, in an environment where I didn't have a voice. Didn't have a voice. Didn't have a voice. Right? So what do you do when you have things to say but no voice to say it with, nor a space to hold it? You bury it, champ. You put it away. You seed it, right? And what I like to convey to people is that nothing you feel, right, can be buried without growing into something else. All right, let's let's get transparent, right? So as a man, right, and we're gonna traverse different periods of my life, right, in this conversation. There is so much to unpack in this conversation. This may have a few parts as it pertains to the podcast. So, burying those emotions, burying what I wanted to say. Let's start with college. Right. So I attended the illustrious Claflin University, right? Right there in the heart of Orangeburg, South Carolina. Baby, I'm talking about top 7 HBCUs in the country year over year. I get down behind the hilltop high. But it was on the hilltop high that I had my first realization that I did not know how to communicate. And I was very narrow-minded, right? And I thought that my experience as a Black American male was the standard, right? I can only be black how I know how to be black, right? And going to Claflin was my first experience outside of my particular culture. So my freshman year of college, the AKAs were having their annual Mr. 1908 pageant. And I didn't have any friends on the yard at the time. I was new. So what happened was I got there in January of 2010 because the first part of that academic year, I was away for military training. So, and even that is me going and getting to college as a first generation college student is an episode for another day. So I get there in the middle of the year. Everybody already have established friendships, circles, all that good stuff. And so I get there. I don't have any friends. I have a best friend that I had happened to go to high school with who came to Claflin. And it was through her that I met the AKAs, right? And so one of the AKAs was like, hey, I've never seen you before. So we chatted it up, chopped it up, whatever. And then ultimately she said, I think you should be in our pageant. And I was like, ain't that for girls, right? She was like, nah. This is a showcase of men who have taste in fashion, who have talents. Like it's gonna be, you know, the big compadre. Like you gotta, I think you'd be great for it, baby. A pretty girl telling me to do something at that point in life. Okay. Well, I need to sign up at. I need to sign up right now. You got a pen? You got a paper? What you need? You need my email address? Here you go. Right? So, and I want to make sure I tell my truth without telling the truths of other people. Y'all know how I feel about that. So, I signed up for the pageant. and I am introduced to the other participants of the pageant, right? And of course, they're all guys. We hang out, we're conversing, getting to know one another, all woody woody woo. So as an advisor, they had brought someone who had won the pageant some time before, right? And I took a liking to him as a friend, right? I'm like, oh, he seems pretty cool. He can dress, like he carries himself in a way that I would like to emulate. So we connect, right? And you're like, yo, man, you seem pretty cool, man. Do you have a mentor, right? And I'm like, nah, I'm straight from the country, gang. Like, I don't even know why I got here for real. So we link, we hang out a few times, and then on one particular day, um, I hit him up, and I'm like, hey, I'm trying to go to the calf. And he says, cool, swing by my room, I'm getting ready now. Which was not unnatural, right? So I'm like, all right, bet on the way. So I go up to his room, right? He's changing or whatever. And so while he's getting ready to go to the cab, I'm looking out his window. Now, the way that his window is positioned, it had a view of the campus behind us, South Carolina State. And so it was a beautiful, I remember it vividly. It was a beautiful spring day. I'm talking about, baby, sundress season in full effect. I'm talking about the yard is hopping and popping. Like, baby, we outside, right? And so while he's getting dressed, I make the comment, and I'm like, and this, please remember, this is a previous version of me, right? So I say, bruh, the hose is outside. Like, baby, we gotta get outside because we're gonna miss our opportunity to get after the hose, right? Um, and he didn't say anything, right? And I didn't, notice immediately. But because he didn't say anything, maybe he didn't hear me. So then I'm like, bruh, did you hear me? Gang, the hose is outside. Like, hurry up, bro. Let's go to the cab so we can slide. And so I'm continuing to look out the window the entire time. And he's like, Carlos. And he said my name in a tone that kind of took my attention quickly. And I was like, yo, what's good? You good? Like, what's up? And he said, what if I told you I don't like women? Y'all, when I tell you my chest dropped out my backside, bruh, I was like, what you mean by that? Like, you don't like girls? Like, you like women? Like, you like grown women? Like, you like a different type of girl? And he like, nah. And I was like, you like guys? And he was like, yeah. Y'all, when I tell y'all I was frozen to that window, I think my heart might have stopped beating. And the reason why is because where I'm from, baby, homosexuality is a sin. I'm talking about fire and brimstone, the end of the world sin, right? And anybody who has anything to do with homosexuality will die and go to hell. That's I'm sorry, that's what I was taught at the time. So the first thought that I have is that how do I get the hell up out of here? I'm looking out the window, plotting my escape. I remember like there was a dresser behind me to the left, his bed was to my right, and he was between me and the door. I am legitimately creating an escape route in my head. And while I'm doing all of this, I am lost to my thoughts. And he says to me, it's okay. This is the part where you stop talking to me. We don't hang out anymore. And this pretty much ends our friendship. And I heard him and I was like, damn, that's exactly what I was about to do. Okay. So now I'm put in a place where I'm kind of seeing myself outside of myself because my immediate knee jerk response was conditioned. It wasn't authentic. Come on. I was conditioned to react this way, but it didn't necessarily identify with how I wanted to react. Right? So, still looking out the window, because baby, this is weird for me. I asked him, I was like, does this happen often? And he was like, what? Like, I meet people and we hang out and we're cool until they find out I'm gay? And I was like, yeah. He was like, yeah, bro, that happened all the time. That's how I knew once you got awkward that this was going to be whatever. You know, it ain't no beef. I get it. And I'm like, I think to myself, that must be heartbreaking to meet and connect with people that you enjoy sharing a space with, only to be excluded because of what you enjoy for yourself, right? And so immediately in my mind, after having that thought, my next thought was, am I gay? Yo, I'm telling you, bro, I was so confused and discombobulated because I was fighting against what I was conditioned to do, right, with what I wanted to do. And I wanted to be his friend, but I was conditioned to not connect with him. That's going to go over some of y'all heads. I was fighting between doing what I was conditioned to do versus doing what I wanted to do. So I turned around and I asked him, what does it mean for you to be friends with somebody? And he was like, what you mean? Like, we friends now. And I'm like, no. Like, I got it. Like, what? Like, you can't ask me for no relationship advice, bro. And he was like, it was like, Carlos, why would I ask you for relationship advice if we have two different relational dynamics? And I'm like, all right, you're right. And you don't like me, right? And he was like, Carlos, no, I don't like you in that way. You actually low-key get on my nerves. That's why we hang out only a few times a week. You full of yourself and you can be very arrogant sometimes. All right, not too much. Not too much. I ain't ask you for all that. But nah, we went to the caf and we hung out. And we continued to discuss his experiences with connections that he's lost because of his sexuality. And that was for me the very first time in my life when I began to see myself for who I was conditioned to be and not who I thought I was. I thought I was a open-minded, good, accepting person until I was put into a situation that was unfamiliar. And Then it became, I want absolutely no parts of this because of my conditioning. So, yeah. Now, that for me was a life altering experience, because following that, I approach relationships and connections differently, as it pertains to my ability to hear somebody, to understand somebody. But effective communication requires both understanding and expression, right? Um, and I think we're going to, nah, nah. I was going to say we're going to save that for tomorrow, but nah, I want to dig into that. I want to delve into that now. So, going back to the initial part of the conversation where I didn't have the ability to express, as a child, as a teenager. Um, and everybody has their traumas, right? So we talk about mine, particularly now. Um, so, what do you do when you wake up one day and you have a voice after not having one for 20 years? What do you do with your ability to speak after being incapable of speaking for 20 years? Well, I'll tell you what I did. I decided that whatever I had to say would be heard and I would never be silenced again under any conditions. In any space that I take up, I will never be quiet again. That was my response. And that's how I carried myself in relationships, in my general existence, in the army, as a trainer, as whoever. I will not shut up. And my inability to shut up caused me to say a whole lot of things that never needed to be said. But I'm talking because I can, because I know what it's like to not be able to talk. So, one of the key experiences that I had with learning to feel through my expressions, was my first divorce. Um, yeah, my first wife, was is a phenomenal person. She's loving. She's selfless. Um, she's everything a wife should be. Um, yeah, and I mean that. This is usually the part where people are like, "Oh my God, is there no hope?" Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We don't get me wrong. We had our Blueface and Krishan phase, right? So we met at Claflin, right? And we dated on and off, majority on, for years, right? And if I'm going to be quite honest, quite frank with you, I was terrible as a man, as a boyfriend, as a husband. And by terrible, I mean, I cheated, right? I lied about cheating. I gaslit the hell out of her. Um, all of that, right? But in my doing all of those things, you couldn't tell me I wasn't a good man, right? Because I'm still providing. I'm still spending the time. I'm still giving you what I believe meets the standard of being a good man, right? Everything I do outside of that is just what men do. And that was wrong, right? I knew that then, but I was willing to blame the fact that I'm just a guy. I'm a man, bro. Like, bro, you know what it is out here in these streets. They see the player get played, okay? Um, so fast forward, we got married on a particular date. I was in a bad place in my life, and by bad I mean I was a juvenile probation officer at the time, and if you know, they don't make good money, right? So I was living check to check. I ain't had no spending money. I wasn't budgeting, but I was broke. You hear me? I'm talking about with a capital K, gang. And so we were dating at the time, a long distance relationship, and she hit me one day and she like, I'ma join the Navy. And I was like, oh, I wanna say no. I wanna say don't do that. I wanna say that's not necessary. I wanna right? But selfishly, I saw the benefit of her joining the Navy more than I did the detriment of her joining the Navy. I considered, oh, we'll have an amazing life. We'll move. This is the new start we need. And in actuality, it was the new start that I needed. So, being the quote unquote full good man that I was supportive. Hey, baby, do it. Let's get up out of here. You're gonna get us out the trenches. You're gonna save us. Like, yeah, it's lit. You need the career change, all the things. So she did, and I was supportive because by then I had been in the army for X amount of time. So we essentially got married in the great state of Illinois, right outside the Great Lakes Naval Base. And I was happy, or so I thought. We moved, we settled, and we started winning, right? The money was coming in, bills were paid, we were budgeting well. Everything that I lacked prior to this marriage, those needs were now met. And one critical lesson that I've learned is that met needs bring clarity. And that goes back to one of the previous episodes when we talked about sobriety of mind. And what happened was I became sober in our financial stability. And I realized that I did not love this woman the way a husband should love his wife. Yeah. And unfortunately, there were some things done from that lack of love, that lack of honor, that lack of respect that I'm ashamed of. And so God has a way of putting you where you need to be when you need to be there. So I was in a situation where I had to tell the truth. I had to express. I had to say something that was different than the voice and my ability to speak had made room for. Because before this moment, it was rah, 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 I'm the man. This rah, 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 rah. And now I have to express that I've done something that's going to break your heart. And that's different because you can't say that outside of a particular tone. It's humbling to tell the woman who loves you more than anything that you did something unloving to her. And it may have rippling effects. So, I did it. I told the truth. And she almost killed me, yo! I promise you. Swear to God, I thought it was gonna kill me. Listen, listen. Stuff was flying. My TV got busted. That girl, man, I just knew that was gonna be the last day I had on this green earth. So, no cap. I'm not being facetious. I couldn't come home that night. And rightfully so, right? And I'm laughing now, but that I still carry that with me. And even after all of that, she was willing to forgive me and stay married. And I was put back in a position where I had to express, I had to say, I had to reframe how I was taught to speak or how I taught myself to speak, how I was conditioned to speak, because what I'm conditioned to do won't work in the space that I'm in. So I have to be authentic. And I gotta say something that I'm not accustomed to saying. Something that doesn't make me feel powerful. Something that doesn't help me raise my voice. Something that does not help me take control of a room that I'm in. I have to say that I'm sorry, but I don't love you how I should. And if I stay here, I'm going to break you down. How do you say that? How do you say that to a woman who loves you? How do you say that to a woman who's given everything? How do you say that? Through tears. That's how you say that. I never learned how to truly speak to people until that moment. Because I was overwhelmed with sympathy when she cried. Right? When I said we shouldn't do this anymore. We shouldn't stay married. This is going to destroy us. And I don't want to do that to you. I don't want to do that to me. Now, in hindsight, could I have stayed and maybe the trust would have come, the love that a man and woman should have come? Maybe. But I knew that it would come at the risk and result of additional trauma. And I didn't know what to do with that. So I told her the truth. They say the truth sets you free, but I don't necessarily agree with that anymore. I think the truth makes you feel. And we gonna end tonight's episode on that note. Yeah. So as we wrap this up, um, if you're a man, because I can only speak to men, right, in this particular way, I encourage you to sit with yourself and your connections and the ways that you communicate. Are you being empathetic? Right? Are you understanding well? Are you receiving well? Right? Are you sitting with yourself before you respond to ensure that you're not responding in a state of condition, but you're responding in a state of authenticity? And are you encouraging the men that are connected to you to do the same? Thank you for your time tonight. Until next time, be well.